There is a law being written in Brussels right now that almost nobody outside a few committee rooms has actually read. It is called the Plant Reproductive Material Regulation, and the final negotiations open on the 3rd of February this year. The people deciding it are aiming to lock the text by the end of June. And if you save seeds from your own garden, or trade a handful of tomato seeds with a neighbor over the fence, this is the first European seed law in 60 years that could reach into that exchange. I want to be honest with you about something before we go one sentence further. You have probably seen a headline somewhere claiming the European Union has banned heirloom seeds. That headline is not true, and I am not going to repeat it. Nothing has been banned. No backdoor patent has switched off your grandmother's bean variety. What is actually happening is quieter, slower, and in some ways more important, because it is still being decided while you watch this. So let me tell you what the real situation is, what the draft text actually says, and where the genuine risk sits for a backyard gardener. The current rules on selling seeds in Europe are a patchwork of 10 separate directives, the oldest from 1966. For 60 years, those rules applied to one thing only, putting seed on the market for commercial sale. If you were not selling, you were invisible to the law. You could save, swap, and replant whatever you wanted. The new regulation rewrites all 10 of those directives into one. And here is the line that should make any seed saver sit up. In the version that worries conservation groups the most, the law would no longer apply only to commercial sale. It would, for the first time, reach into exchanges between gardeners and between farmers, the everyday passing of seed from one hand to another that has nothing to do with money. That is the heart of the fight happening in Brussels at this exact moment. Before I go further, a quick aside, and then straight back to the explanation. Everything I'm walking through here comes from the public draft text and from the conservation networks reading it line by line. I have put together a plain language guide that lays out which articles matter, what is exempt, and what is captured, and the link for that is the first link in the description below. It exists because the official documents are written for lawyers, not for people with a vegetable patch. Now, back to the law itself. The regulation keeps two old pillars in place. A variety must be registered, and the seed must be certified before it can go on the market. Registration means a variety has to pass a test for being distinct, uniform, and stable. And that is precisely the test that traditional varieties tend to fail. An heirloom tomato is not uniform. That is the entire point of it. It varies plant to plant, season to season, garden to garden. The law does carve out softer categories for what it calls conservation varieties, and for material sold only to amateur gardeners. But the Council's position from December attaches a condition that matters. A conservation variety could be produced only in its region of origin. Think about what that means in practice. A regional bean, tied by law to the region it came from, cannot simply travel and be grown freely everywhere. There is a second, sharper concern, and it is the closest real thing to the patent fear in that false headline. Conservation groups warn about a pattern they call biopiracy. It works like this. A company or an institution registers as a new official variety, something that local communities have quietly grown and saved for generations. Once it is registered under a new name, the worry is that the old community name can no longer be used to market it. The variety does not disappear, but the people who kept it alive can lose the right to sell it under the name they always used. That is not a ghost patent. It is something more ordinary and, to me, more troubling, because it can happen through a registration form rather than a conspiracy. So let me be very clear about what is true and what is not. It is not true that you are about to be forbidden from growing potatoes or beans in your own backyard. The draft text says plainly that it does not touch what end users, amateur gardeners, do with seed for their own private use. What is genuinely unsettled is the space just past your own private use, giving seed to a friend, trading at a swap, the small local seed library at the community center. Conservation organizations are asking negotiators to write a clear exemption so that this kind of sharing stays outside the law entirely. As of now, that exemption is not guaranteed. It is one of the open questions on the table. That is why the timing of this video is not an accident. The decision is being made in the coming weeks, not in some distant year. A reminder while we are here, if you want the article-by-article breakdown, which exchanges are protected, which are at risk, and what the difference is between a conservation variety and a standard one, that full guide is the first link in the description. I built it from the public proposal text and the analyses of the seed networks actually working on this. Now let me explain why this matters, even if you live nowhere near Europe. Seed law is contagious. Rules written in Brussels become the reference text that other regions copy or react against. And the deeper issue underneath all of it is the slow narrowing of what we are allowed to grow. Over the last century, an enormous share of cultivated plant diversity has been lost. Much of what remains survives precisely because gardeners and small farmers kept saving and swapping varieties that no catalog ever bothered to register. A law that makes that swapping harder does not need to ban a single seed to do damage. It only needs to make the informal exchange of seed inconvenient enough that fewer people bother. That is the real mechanism, not a ban. Attrition. So here's what I would actually do, and none of it requires panic. First, learn the difference between an open pollinated variety and an F1 hybrid, because that single distinction explains why your saved seeds sometimes do not grow true. An open pollinated variety breeds true from saved seed. An F1 hybrid does not, and that is by design, not by law. Second, if you live in Europe, the comment period and your representatives are not theoretical. This text is open right now. Third, keep saving and keep sharing, because the strongest protection any variety has ever had is being grown in many gardens at once. Let me put one last thing plainly before we close. I'm not selling you fear, and I'm not selling you a secret. The guide linked below is simply the public situation, translated out of legal language and into something a gardener can use, with the specific articles laid out so you can check them yourself. The link is pending for this channel and will be the first link in the description. If this is the kind of thing you want, the careful version instead of the screaming headline, then subscribe. Because the quiet laws are the ones that change everything, and almost nobody's reading them out loud.